Humidity clings to a Pacific night on a United States Marine Corps installation as sodium lights carve hard shadows across the armory service road and the barracks. The base sits at a high force protection condition. Concrete holds heat. Boots whisper. And the air tastes like salt and metal. Every edge feels close. Private First Class Jake Miller stands a few steps off the fence line on a temporary access control detail with a handheld radio and a flashlight. His job is simple and strict. Watch the corridor. Challenge unknown movement. Keep hands in the beam. And call it up before any hands-on. He keeps his breathing slow and tries to read the ground. A woman in dark civilian clothing moves with calm purpose near the restricted area. She is Ms. Jordan Hayes. No reflective belt by design. Arms loose at her sides. Stride steady and unhurried. Jake clocks the angle. The distance. The quiet. Stakes arrive fast in the chest like a dropped weight. One decision in 2 seconds can trigger a lockdown. Light up radios across the net. And wreck careers. He shifts. The flashlight slips. And hits the deck with a dull clap. The narrow cone of light spins and shows how little he actually sees. Somewhere out of sight, the installation commander watches a quiet, unannounced security test with a red team assessor. None of that is clear to Jake yet. The night only offers a fence, a beam of light, and a choice. We will break down the right sequence next. Challenge. Distance. Radio. Control. The Pacific night sits heavy on a United States Marine Corps installation. Rumors of missing equipment push the force protection condition higher. And the base feels tighter because of it. Sodium lights paint hard shadows that slice across the armory service road and the barracks. The air is wet and warm. And everything carries a faint taste of salt and metal. Concrete walkways hold the heat and return it like a low breath. Chain link hums in the breeze, and the fence line becomes a ruler for the eye. Every dark corner looks deeper than usual. Every sound is a little too sharp. Private First Class Jake Miller stands along the armory service road on a temporary access control detail. He carries a handheld radio on the unit net and a flashlight that fits the palm. His orders are simple and strict. Observe the corridor. Challenge unknown movement. And keep the mission quiet and clean. The method matters as much as the result. Unknown persons are challenged, then held at a reactionary gap of at least 6 to 10 feet. Hands stay in the narrow beam of the light so the Marine can actually read intent. The next step happens with the radio before any hands-on. That radio connects Jake to the people who can help him do this right. Duty non-commissioned officer Sergeant Chris Alvarez monitors the area, listens for clean reports, and moves when support is needed. Installation Commander Colonel David Marshall watches the wider picture and tracks the health of the base. A red team assessor named Ms. Jordan Hayes operates tonight under a letter of authorization from higher headquarters. Her presence is deliberate and quiet, and most Marines will not know she is testing anything until the assessment is complete. The point is to measure procedures under stress, not to stage a show. The test respects safety and chain of command. It is real enough to matter and controlled enough to learn from. One bad decision on a night like this can reach far past one post. The wrong move can trigger a base lockdown and bring patrols into motion. Misread signals can lead to blue on blue, which means friendly forces misidentify each other as threats. Careers can bend under paperwork and investigations, even when no one gets hurt. That is why the small steps get so much attention. A Marine who keeps the reactionary gap buys time and clarity. A Marine who calls it up first uses the whole team, not just pride and speed. A Marine who keeps hands in the light keeps risk from turning into panic. The visuals help the rules stick. The flashlight throws a tight cone that fills only a small circle on the ground. Anything outside that circle is guesswork. The job is to pull what matters into the beam and leave the rest for the radio to solve. Humidity and hard shadows do not care about intent. The fence does not care about confidence. Facts matter more than feelings when the only thing between order and confusion is a few clear steps. Discipline beats bravado because it keeps people alive and keeps careers intact. This is why the night matters before anything dramatic happens. Viewers need to understand the standard that protects everyone. Challenge first. Hold the distance. Key the radio. Then use proportional control only if needed. The story will show what goes wrong when even one of those steps is skipped. The memory returns to Jake like a muscle flinch in the dark. At the School of Infantry, he stumbled in a Marine Corps martial arts program drill and ended up on the mat with his lungs locked tight. He told himself that next time he would move first and never feel that helpless breath again. That promise sits in his chest while the night presses in. The installation breathes with a higher force protection condition and a steady hum of radios. Humidity drapes the armory service road and turns every breath into warm fog. Sodium light stacks shadow on shadow along the fence line. The world narrows to what the flashlight can hold. Miss. Jordan Hayes moves along the fence with steady hands and a calm pace. Her arms are easy at her sides and she does not crowd the wire. Nothing about her posture shouts danger. Everything about her path says she knows where she is going. Jake knows the sequence that keeps people safe. Keep the reactionary gap at 6 to 10 feet and keep the hands in the beam. Call it up on the handheld radio and wait for guidance before any hands-on. The words sit ready like tools in a pouch. He brushes the push-to-talk button with his thumb and then pulls back. A voice inside says that action looks like courage and waiting looks like fear. He feels the old drill echo in his ribs, and he wants it to end with him on top. The fence hums a soft vibration that sounds like a dare. The shadow line at the base of the fence becomes a thin border for the mind. On one side is vigilance that uses light and distance to read intent. On the other side is paranoia that fills darkness with threat. He can feel his weight shift toward the wrong side. The flashlight draws a tight cone over her hands and the ground in front of her shoes. Outside that circle, the night is only guesswork and edges. He tells himself he is reading enough to act. He is not reading enough to know. Sweat collects under his collar and runs down his shoulder blades. His grip on the flashlight is strong and a little too firm. The radio rests against his chest like a promise he does not cash in. He pictures Sergeant Chris Alvarez stepping in, and he wants to be useful before that happens. He takes a small step that eats the space he should protect. He keeps the beam on her hands but moves closer anyway. He has not called for backup, and he has not made the report. The next beat waits for him at arm's length. Humidity presses against the armory service road as the base holds a high force protection condition. Private First Class Jake Miller plants his boots just inside the fence line and lifts his flashlight until the beam steadies. He draws a breath that tastes like warm salt, and once it settles, he gives the challenge in a clear voice, the way he was taught. Ms. Jordan Hayes stops as soon as she hears him. Her hands rise and settle inside the narrow cone of light, where he can see every finger. She keeps her shoulders low and her eyes on the beam so he can track movement without guessing. She waits for instruction and does not drift forward on her own. Each step she takes only follows a direct command and only as far as the beam allows. The light becomes a fence inside the fence and both of them understand the boundary. Jake runs the mental checklist that matches the setting. Reactionary gap stays open at 6 to 10 feet, so no one can reach or grab without a full step. Hands remain visible at all times, and the flashlight is the cue that defines what visible means. Identification is not a rush job on a dark road. If there is a letter of authorization, then it gets verified through the right person and not in a grab and tug at the edge of a restricted area. The rule is simple and strict. Call it up on the net before any hands-on. His thumb finds the push-to-talk button and rests there. He can feel the texture of the rubber and the tiny give, as if the radio is ready to do the work with him. He knows the call will bring another set of eyes and another brain, and that is the point. On the net, the clean report would be short and complete. Post 2 Miller at the Armory fence line, east side. Female on foot in dark clothing, calm, and claims authorization. Standing by for guidance and request backup. Sergeant Chris Alvarez listens for reports like that and moves when they are crisp. He watches positions on a quiet map in his head and closes distance with measured steps only when a Marine has laid down the right words first. He is the steady hand that keeps the night from turning into a guess. Colonel David Marshall is out there too, as an observer with the quiet patience of someone who understands systems. He is present for an unannounced security assessment, and he is not there to startle or to grandstand. He watches the process more than the people, because the process is what protects them. Ms. Jordan Hayes stands inside the light and gives clipped answers that are calm and useful without claiming clearance. She states movement along the service road and that she can present to the proper authority when directed to the correct location. Her tone is flat on purpose, so that no one confuses confidence with access. The concrete under Jake's boots grinds a little when he shifts, and the sound feels louder than it should. He reminds himself that the job is to slow the moment until it is readable. The job is not to end the moment fast. He can feel a tug that wants him to close the space anyway. He tells himself that he is decisive, and that decisive means bold steps. He knows that decisive can also mean clear words on the radio, and a pause that lets help get there. The beam holds steady on her hands, and he confirms that both palms remain open. The rest of the world fades to a smear beyond the circle of light, and that is the warning built into the tool. The beam shows what is known. The edges remind him of what is not. Procedure asks for the next move to be the radio call, and not a foot forward. Procedure asks for the report first and the hands second, and only if needed. Procedure is boring when done well, and that is its strength. He hovers on the decision point. The fence hums, and the night sweats, and the radio waits, with a kind of patience only gear can have. He pulls his thumb back from the push to talk, as if one more second will make the picture clearer without the call. Somewhere past the light, the observer, who matters most, is still watching. The assessment is still live, and still quiet, and still designed to find a weak step in a strong chain. Nothing bad has happened yet because the steps have almost been right. Jake leans forward and eats a little of the gap he is supposed to guard. He keeps the light on her hands, but his body is no longer where it should be. He has not called for backup, and the clean brevity call is still trapped in his throat. The night holds its breath with him. The good process that was meant to carry the weight now strains under pride and hurry. The mistake is not here yet, but it is close enough to touch. He abandons the plan at the exact point where the plan matters most. The reactionary gap that should live at 6 to 10 feet shrinks with 2 quick steps. The handheld radio stays quiet against his chest while his heartbeat fills the space where a clean report should be. Humidity sits on his shoulders like a pack, and he decides to act instead of call. He reaches for the rear naked choke he learned in Marine Corps martial arts program training. That technique has value in the right context, with real danger and clear authorization. It is not approved for a routine access control encounter on a dark road without a deadly threat. He closes to arm's reach and tries to lock it anyway. Ms. Jordan Hayes responds like a professional inside a supervised assessment. She shifts her hips, traps the nearest wrist, and touches a legal pressure point to interrupt his grip. The goal is to create space without injury, while an observer and a controller track every move. She acts with economy and leaves no marks. Jake expects resistance that thrashes, and instead meets a quiet machine that slips and turns. His balance goes first. His shoulder bumps the fence post, and his boots skate on grit. He hits the concrete with a short breath and a sharp lesson. The flashlight escapes his hand and skitters across the road. It spins and throws a narrow cone of light that chases its own circle. The tiny beam proves how little he actually saw when he moved. Everything outside that circle is still guesswork. Sergeant Chris Alvarez enters the edge of the scene with the posture of a duty non-commissioned officer who has seen nights like this. One hand rests on the handheld radio, and the other hangs free. His weapon stays holstered, and his eyes move to the corners that matter for safety. He is calm in the way that slows everyone else down. Jake pushes to his knees and blurts that the woman is inside the wire near the armory. The words sound urgent and thin. They also arrive too late to qualify as a report that helps anyone. Distance and radio would have given him time and a partner before he reached for a hold he did not need. The controlled assessment continues under watch. The observer notes how quickly the gap collapsed. The controller marks the missed radio call and the unauthorized choke attempt. The point is not pain or pride. The point is to surface the weak link while risk stays as low as possible. This is what a single unauthorized move can do. It opens the door to blue on blue if someone else rounds a corner and sees hands-on with no context. It invites paperwork and investigations that pull time and focus away from mission tasks. It can force a base lockdown and turn a small scene into a wide disruption. The right actions were plain even in the wet dark. Hold 6 to 10 feet and keep both hands in the light. Key the radio first with a short report that gives post. Exact location along the armory fence line. Description. Behavior. And a request for backup. Use soft control only if someone resists, after help arrives, and only at a level that matches the threat. On the ground, the lesson lands harder than the fall. Pride feels big until it meets a simple checklist that would have protected everyone. The checklist is boring by design, and that is its hidden strength. It turns heat into clarity and turns rush into teamwork. Ms. Jordan Hayes has already released and taken a half step back. She keeps her hands visible in the beam and waits for proper direction. The assessment is still live and still quiet. The next voice that matters is the one that puts the night back on track. The figure steps from the shadows and the night loosens. Installation Commander Colonel David Marshall crosses the hard light and ends the scene with a single word that carries weight by itself. The sound is calm and final. The air seems to breathe again. Ms. Jordan Hayes releases at once. She takes a half step back and shows open hands inside the beam. Palms forward. Fingers relaxed. Her posture is neutral and non-threatening. Correct for a civilian during a controlled assessment. She waits for proper direction without crowding the wire. Sergeant Chris Alvarez takes the scene in and steadies it without noise. One hand rests on the handheld radio while his eyes scan corners, angles, and hands. His weapon stays holstered because the posture of the crowd and the behavior do not justify more. He anchors the tempo so no one rushes. The colonel is not loud. He is specific. He states that Ms. Hayes is a Red Team assessor who is operating under a letter of authorization from higher headquarters. He notes that the event is an unannounced penetration test and a use of force evaluation. He faces Private First Class Jake Miller with the same steady tone. He acknowledges that Jake issued a correct challenge. He lists what failed to follow. The reactionary gap collapsed. The radio call never happened. And an unauthorized choke was attempted during a routine access control encounter. Jake hears the words and feels the shape of each rule he skipped. He can still taste humidity and grit from the fall. He can see the flashlight beam shaking on the ground like a metronome that has lost the beat. He keeps his hands still and lets the correction land. The colonel keeps it professional and clean. He explains that professional control is stronger than impulse because it protects lives and careers. He reminds the post that a radio call brings teammates and clarity faster than a lunge. He sets the expectation that standards are the measure of courage at night. Sergeant Alvarez confirms the perimeter with a quiet sweep. He checks the angles, the fence line, and the service road that runs past the armory. He gives a nod that signals the scene is stable. The calm spreads the way discipline does when everyone understands their lane. Ms. Hayes maintains distance and keeps her hands in the light while the explanation concludes. Her stance remains neutral and patient. She models compliance so the training value stays high. Nothing escalates because the roles are clear and respected. Colonel Marshall shifts the group from incident to lesson. He signals that an after-action review will begin on scene, so the learning lands while details are fresh. He wants the steps captured in the same light that almost hid them. He wants the fix to feel as real as the mistake. The crisis is contained. The chain of command is present and steady. The radios are quiet except for breathing and the small sounds of boots on concrete. The next minutes will turn a near miss into a standard that can be carried to the next night. Colonel David Marshall shifts the scene into a live after-action review. His presence is calm and steady, and the hard edges of the night start to soften. He sets the frame so everyone understands what the standard looks like when it is done right. The focus is learning, not shame. First is the challenge. The unknown person is addressed clearly and immediately, with hands brought into the light for visibility. The Marine keeps the voice level and the language simple, so the person can follow instructions without confusion. The flashlight becomes a tool that confirms control without touching anyone. Second is distance. The reactionary gap stays at 6 to 10 feet so the Marine can read intent and buy time. The hands remain in the beam, because what is not illuminated is guesswork, and guesswork is risk. The gap is a safety line for both people, and it must not collapse without cause. Third is the radio. The handheld radio comes first before any hands-on, because the team matters more than one pair of boots. A clean brevity call sounds like this, in plain words. Post 2 Miller. Armory. Fence line east side. Female on foot in dark clothing. Calm and claims authorization. Request backup. Standing by. That call gives location, description, behavior, and the request that brings help without drama. Fourth is control that fits the moment. Soft control techniques are used only when needed, and only when another Marine is present to support. Any choke stays off the table unless there is a true deadly threat and a clear legal basis. Proportional force is the rule that keeps lives and careers intact. Ms. Jordan Hayes adds a calm reminder in narration that steady answers do not equal clearance and fast breathing does not equal courage. She models compliance with open hands and neutral posture so the training value stays visible. Her role and her letter of authorization give the assessment structure and accountability. The point is to test the system, not to win a fight. Sergeant Chris Alvarez offers the model brevity call again so the cadence sticks. He keeps his tone even and the words short, because clarity is faster than speed. He notes that the radio also records that the Marine waited for guidance, which protects everyone if questions arise later. Documentation is part of discipline. Colonel Marshall closes by reframing what heroism looks like at night. Professional control is the real courage, because it makes space for judgment and keeps teammates safe. Procedure is not a burden when it prevents blue on blue and prevents a lockdown that wastes hours and trust. The standard is simple enough to remember when the air is thick and the shadows press in. The beam finds hands. The gap holds. The net carries a clear report. The rest happens with support. Soft control, if needed, and respect for the chain of command. The heat eases as the scene settles, and a quieter rhythm returns to the road by the armory. Private First Class Jake Miller accepts the correction and lets it change his next move. He lifts his flashlight and centers the beam where it belongs on hands and distance. No excuses. Only a breath that steadies and a standard that holds. Duty non-commissioned officer Sergeant Chris Alvarez gives a steady nod that says the unit will tighten up and move forward. He keeps one hand near the handheld radio and his eyes on the corners that matter. The posture is calm and it spreads in a simple way. People pick up the pace of discipline without a single extra word. Carry this with you on any night shift. Challenge first. Keep distance. Use the radio. Apply control that fits. These 4 steps are small on paper and large when the air is heavy and the shadows press in. They keep teammates safe. They protect careers. And they turn a guess into a plan. If discipline saved you from a mistake, share that moment in the comments so someone else can learn it at 7:15 a.m. or at 2:30 p.m. Pass this video to the friend who stands watch when most of the world is asleep. Respect the chain of command and the quiet courage it asks for. The strongest muscle out here is humility. Trained, one clear step at a time.